Welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of the 6 M's of Manufacturing podcast. I'm your host, Adrienne Temple. Small manufacturing enterprises make up the lion's share of the industry in most states. Keen decision-making and a willingness to embrace change are only a few of the trademarks of successful small businesses. In this episode, we talk with Danny Hogge Jr. with Hogge Precision in Hartsville, South Carolina, to learn more about balancing risk and reward in his job shop. Danny, I just want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Adrienne. Thank you for having me.
I really wanted to have Hogge Precision and you on this episode because I think people need to kind of understand, a little bit more about what you guys do and some things that you've done over the years that I've seen just in my experience working with you. I think it's really great to share the message of some of the innovations and things that you're doing. But I guess to get started, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of lay the groundwork and tell the folks that might be listening a little bit more about Hogge Precision, what the organization does, and then, maybe some of the business segments that you serve.
Sure. So we're a job shop, precision machining, contract manufacturer. We don't develop our own products. We make everything to pre-engineered prints. Essentially, we're a service provider is what we are. Customer base is pretty diverse. That's one of the reasons for our success, but we're into a lot of medical appliance, a medical device, everything outside the body, nothing inside the body yet. Power transmission and switching is a huge customer for us. So think substations, selling to municipalities and your Duke Energies of the world. Safety valves, pop-off valves, flow control valves, so components for those. Control cables, so a lot of the hardware that goes on those cables, whether it be for general commercial use. We also do a lot of A&D, aerospace and defense, for some of those components. A few different customers in that segment, and then a lot of other stuff in between. Water meter components, communication antennas, again, for the defense industry. And I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but it's pretty broad, the different markets that we serve. We've been very fortunate with a very diverse, very, very strong customer base.
And how, obviously, Hogge Precision, you're Danny Hogge. So how did you get started into the business and kind of grow with it over time?
Well, in all honesty, I didn't have much of a choice, if you want to know the truth. Our story actually goes back to the mid-'70s with my dad. So dad grew up on a farm, loved farming. Dad's 70 years old and he still loves to garden to this day. But he knew he couldn't make a living being a farmer. And he took machine shop in high school, which, we'll get into that a little bit later, but I was interested in it, was good at it. After high school, he worked in a few different shops and then decided he was going to go out on his own. And he did in 77. He and a couple other guys partnered up and they started a company doing screw machine products. And that partnership lasted until 1989. One of their biggest customers wanted more of their capacity. They didn't want to give it to them. So that customer bought them. That left one of the owners. He was close to retirement age, so he retired. Then that left my dad and Danny Hogge Sr. and the other owner. And Dad didn't want to work for somebody else. Kind of tough to go back the other direction when you've been in business for yourself for 13 years. So they parted ways. Didn't take long. He started getting calls at home. In the 80s, cell phones hadn't quite become prevalent yet, at least not where we are. And Dad was always kind of the fix-it guy. He was a shop floor fix-it guy. He started getting calls at home. Hey, since you guys sold out, we're having trouble getting stuff. Their focus is on what they make, and what we do get, we're having problems. What are you doing? And of course, Dad's answer was, well, I'm not sure yet. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do next because I just sold 13 years of blood and sweat. So long story short, he had enough of his former customers say, hey, look, if you start a shop, we'll give you a chance. And they did, and he did. And here we are almost 35 years later. I got started when I was about 12 years old. I remember my uncle has a shop up the road, but very successful as well. And as we were building our building, Dad had bought a couple of machines, and he allowed us to use some space in his building. So one summer, again, I was 12 years old. I remember getting up every morning with my dad and another fella, and we would ride back and forth 45 minutes. And I ran a Brown and Sharp square base, just a little chucking machine. I can't remember what I was making, but it was just some little brass parts. So that was how I spent a summer one year when Dad was starting the company. Again, 1989, I was 12 years old when the original building was built. I remember riding my bicycle around in it. It was a couple of weeks before Hurricane Hugo hit. So
Mm.
that was kind of how we got started. A lot of those customers came on board with him within the first couple of years. Um, a lot of the guys that he used to work with at the old company, many of them came to work with him, and a few of them have retired from us already, and some of our senior leadership are still those guys that started out with him in the late 70s and early 80s.
It's just, it makes me think a lot of the smaller shops that I've worked with in the past, those privately held businesses, it always starts with somebody who has a real gift, like a real skill, right? And then they start their own business, they go out there. They're not all as successful as Hog Precision. So I'm kind of interested because it seems like I know whenever we first met, it was probably that was 2014. And every time I would come see you, there'd be something new that you were doing, something new that you'd implemented. So there's obviously a passion or an interest in embracing kind of change and new things. I mean, I remember when you did your tool crib and, some of those types of things. And then you had, some of your newer machines, you were tracking spindles and spindle time. And it seemed like there was this constant evolution, right? And I feel like that's got to be a secret to some of the success and growth, right? It's just that willingness to embrace it. But I mean, what drives you to kind of start where you did with the organization and bring it to where it is today? I mean, what drives that, sort of risk and reward, right? To go after those things and make those kinds of changes.
Well, as I said earlier, I didn't have much of a choice. It was boy, let's go to work. I mean, that's just the way it was, and it's the way I've been with my kids. But the market dictates a lot of that, Adrian. We started out as a screw machine shop, and that was great throughout the 90s. We were a couple of Brown and Sharps, and then New Britons, and some various supportive equipment. We had a couple of CNCs, but it was we were a screw machine shop, is what we were. And in the mid to late 90s, as everybody knows, unfortunately, we had that big old sucking sound called NAFTA that took a lot of the manufacturing base out of this country. At the same time, we had everything moving overseas to Asian low-cost countries, and we certainly were not immune to that. I remember straight out of college in the late 90s, it was, you came to work one day and you didn't lose a job or an order, you lost the entire account. It was, you made parts for them, and then the next day you didn't, and the account was gone. I had one customer in particular Dad had done business with since the early 80s, and they were a big account for us. And they employed about 500 people in the upstate. And about the time they shut us down, they shut that plant down too, because they could get the product overseas, shipped, to put in a warehouse for distribution for less than we could buy the material for, basically. And that was a common theme, and that issue is still there to a degree for certain markets and certain products. So I say all of that to that what drives us, it's survival. Survival drives everybody, and you got to figure out a way to compete when you're in. Let's be honest, it's a lot of unfair practices when you're dealing with those things. So yeah, that's what's going to drive the changes we make, the processes we pursue, the improvements we look for, and just how we run our business. It's driven by competition, in all honesty.
Do you find, I mean, change is always it's always difficult, right? Because you're revamping processes, or maybe you're bringing in new equipment. I mean, do you see that there's with the culture that you guys have, and I'm sure you have some folks that are tenured versus some newer folks. I mean, do you see there's just a general culture of embracing that kind of change just over the years as you guys have done different things to adapt to the market? Do you see that people are willing to embrace those new changes and adapt to it, or is that a bit of an uphill battle?
I would say for the most part, our team has done exceptionally well with embracing new ideas, changes for things. I mean, you don't want to just change for the sake of change. I mean, there has to be it has to be thought out. There has to be a reason. There has to be, it's going to make this better, or it's going to allow us to do whatever that that we can't do now. As long as you have kind of a clear benefit for why you're going to make that change, what's it going to give you? Excuse me. Um, I mean, yeah, the buy-in has been really really good for us. We went from the tool crib, for instance. You mentioned that earlier. So we partnered with our tool and supplier, and they actually have one of their employees that works on site with us now, 40 hours a week. They run our tool crib. Um, Prior to that, each department was kind of responsible for their own tooling, which really meant nobody was responsible for it. And that took a that was probably one of the more challenging things that we had to transition into was, because everybody had their stash, everybody hoarded their tools that they like to use, and getting everyone, building confidence that, hey, this crib, this virtual kitting, this is going to work. It took a little while, to get that buy-in shop wide. It's usually the older guys that have trouble embracing that, which I think is common in everything, really. As we get older, I say we, I'm talking about myself too. We like what we like, and it gets harder to make those changes unless you really see how it's going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I can certainly see that. I mean, you want to see it proven out, right? Show me it's going to work because, and I remember whenever I was in manufacturing, I had a lot of projects and I was in maintenance, and our maintenance guys had their own stuff and their own toolboxes and their own extra parts just in case. And there's sort of I mean, that can be a contentious situation because they're really possessive of those things. They're very protective of it, right? And so it's like to have to jump to something completely different and sort of trust a system or technology to manage it. I'm sure that could be a jump for some folks because of just traditionally how we tend to operate. Like you said, we like our stuff. We like the way we do things. So
Yes, we do.
that's what we were talking about earlier. It's just I'm kind of curious, beyond the tool crib, was there anything else that you kind of pursued or decided to make change on? And you're kind of like, I know we need to do this. I think this is the right direction. Has there been anything like that? I kind of go back to that risk and reward. It's like, are you kind of like, this is a calculated risk, but I'm not really
Well,
sure how this is going to go?
I don't know that. Well, first of all, I'll preface this by, you don't realize some of these things until you look backwards. Um, for us, and again, I give so much credit to my dad. He was and continues to be so forward thinking. Again, in the late '90s, when that business started going away, the mid to high volume stuff. Um, when it left, it was like, okay, we got to figure out what we're going to do. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to survive? How are we going to deal with, ever shrinking lot sizes, more complex parts, um, making sure that we can attract and retain the talent needed to do it, and still at the end of the month have a little something left over to reinvest back into the business.
Yeah.
That sounds real easy to do, but if you've never done it, it's freaking hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. I honestly believe everybody should have to run their own lemonade stand one time, and then they will have a much greater appreciation of what small business owners go through. I really do. But we had to make a change, and we had before everything started going away, we had bought our first true multitask turning machine. It was a Morisiki ZL200. It's a twin turret, twin spindle CNC machine, a turning center with live tooling and a 12-foot bar feeder. And it was it it was a great machine. It taught us how to run unattended, and unattended nowadays is a huge. It's the thing. It's a buzzword. It has been for probably 5 years. We started in 2000. So we've been doing it for 20 years. We bought that first machine. Later on, we realized that, hey, you can run two of these things as easy as you can run one, especially if you're making 500 of this, 1,000 of that, whatever the case may be. So we did a building expansion, and we traded that machine in for something that was a little better suited for what we were making. Not that it was bad, it just wasn't really. It had its own issues and wasn't quite right for us. So we bought two of them, did a big building expansion, and then a customer lost a huge product line that we had intended on using this for. Yeah. You often wonder, why do you see brand new machine tools on the used market? That's exactly why. You go out and buy a machine and then the customer evaporates. And unfortunately that happens in our business, but luckily it worked out. We realized we could do so much more with those machines, especially in the lower batch sizes. So we started out with those two. A couple of years later, I think by about this would have been '04, we had 4 machines in that area, and we were running a lot of lights out, and it was working for us. It was allowing us to transition. We were picking up some new business. We were getting better at how we had done things we had done for a decade. Fast forward into around '07, '08. Of course, we all know what happened there. But everything crashed. Overnight, everybody went from busy to more than you could do to, am I going to be able to turn the lights on the next day? I remember at that time we had 70 employees, and by the end of the day, we had 29. And that included myself, my mom, and my dad. Again, everybody should have to run their own lemonade stand one time, because that is an incredibly difficult thing to go through. And but we got through it, fortunately. 09, 010, things kind of started picking back up. We were all still really gun shy because, again, our folks that work with us, again, I mentioned we've got guys that have been with us for 30 years. They do become like family to us, and they're more than just an employee-employer relationship. I do consider so many of the folks to work with us more than that. So to have to look someone in the eye and say, you know what, I'm sorry, you don't have a job anymore because of something outside of mine and your control, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. So as business started picking back up, I really didn't want to go out and hire a ton of people because I was scared to death to have to go through that again. So we started, okay, well, let's start re-embracing this lights out thing. And it kind of happened by accident. We were bringing on a new product line with a relatively new customer. We were actually going to make the parts on our screw machines because it was decent volume. And we had our tooling on order, and our customer was getting their last batch of product from their legacy supplier. And something happened, order didn't come through, or the order came in and parts were no good. So they called us in a panic. Hey, we need 500 of this widget ASAP. What can you do? So we were talking with the customer, and we were just like, well, our tooling hasn't come in, but I mean, we can make the part with just stuff we got off the shelf. So we set up one of those twin turrets, and we got it all going. It was a team effort, all of us, just doing whatever we could to take care of that customer. And 2:30, 3 o'clock, okay, we got it done. We've been through our first piece process. We knew we had a good part. It was time to go home. And I was like, well, guys, the customer needs these parts. Let's just let this thing run tonight. And we all were like, well, are we sure? And I'm like, guys, it's brass. The worst thing's going to happen is the parts won't be any good, and we'll just recycle the metal with the scrap mill, with scrap at the brass mill. Well, we come in the next morning, lo and behold, and here's 500 pristine parts. And the lights went off. So that began about a probably about a years long journey of, dare I say, rediscovering how to run unattended, how to run lights out. Um, Sadly, when you go through down times, maintenance is one of those things that you stretch out because you're trying to conserve every dollar you can. So, with the team, we spent 6 months of just working on stuff. Um, you don't realize just how much intervention you have with an operator when they're here during the day if everything in your process isn't perfect. Um, and it was something all the time. You'd fix one issue and then you'd have two or three more that would pop up, and you'd fix those, and then you deal with this, and it was just a process. And then all of a sudden you look around and you realize, hey, we hadn't had to fix anything in a few weeks. Maybe we've got this thing figured out. So so it was, all right, we're going to do brass, we're going to do 12L14, and we might do a little bit of aluminum. Aluminum, it's easy to work with, but chip control was a real problem. But we figured, okay, maybe we can make this work. It didn't take us long to, okay, now we're running 316 stainless steel, we're running 17.4, we're running, you know, relatively difficult materials, lights out. During this same time, we added Swiss capability. We replaced about a dozen Brown and Sharp screw machines with just a couple of Swiss machines. You can run them lights out. We had one particular product line. Again, a part of this is that innovation and trying to remain competitive. A product line we had made for a long time required 7 to 8 operations every part. Labor intensive. Everything had to be handled. With the new Swiss technology, we knocked it down to 3. And it was amazing. It allowed us to be competitive, sell the part for a lower price than we had in the past, and actually make a little bit more profit on it. But again, all of that was embracing those new ideas. So, running unattended, taking as much labor out, embracing all that new technology, those things from about, that journey started in around 2000. And really, I'd say we hit maturity by about 2013, 2014, with being able to embrace that style of manufacturing. And now when a drawing comes in, it's not, how can we run it lights out? It's what do we got to do to make it do it? Even if it's just for a couple of hours. A lot of people get wrapped up in, well, this has to be able to run 24 hours a day for me to justify it. No, it doesn't. You can run a couple hours a day a week. By the end of the week, you've picked up a day, day and a half. By the end of the month, that's another week of pre-production out of your machine. And that's kind of the way you got to look at it.
Yeah, I've had conversations before with people that were very, very small machine shops, very, very small, like mom and pop, and maybe, they've got a couple of sons in the business and they're running the equipment. And I would say, well, we had to have business coming in, or they could take on more business. And then the question is, well, we can't really afford to bring on labor right now. And it's like, well, will this machine run lights out? And it was like, it can,
Mhm.
but we're not going to do that. And I think it's that, kind of crossing that threshold to take that first step. Like you said, even in your situation is like, okay, we need to get these parts out. I mean, the same thing as your business, do you need to have more business? Do you need to be able to produce more volume? Is it worth the attempt to try it to see if you can increase your capacity, because you can't add labor cost right now. So, but I've run into situations where clients have been unwilling to take that chance. And I feel like sometimes, and I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but it does seem like sometimes that's a limiting factor, is just not looking at that and saying, well, let's just test it, right? Let's just see where that gets us. But there is a lot of hesitation to do that in some smaller shops, I think, probably just concerned about what may happen if they only have a couple of machines, right? I mean, you're worried about, that's my livelihood. What if something happens? But I have seen some resistance to that in the past.
Sure. And that's natural. I mean, I've had it, we've all had it. We've been through parts that, there's no way we can run lights out. But with a lot of the more modern, and when I say modern, I don't mean a brand new 2023 machine tool. I'm talking if you got a machine that's made after 2000, just about all of them have some tool life management features and some load monitoring features that you can build into your programs to help ease some of that fear. Um, set a torque limiter on, and or I mean, goodness, Adrian, worst case, just set a count. You run the job all day long. I can run 50 pieces before I have to make an adjustment. Well, set the counter for 50 and go home. Go spend some time with your family, you know, and then come check it out the next day. Maybe you don't start out with the hardest part you're working on or something with a really high material cost, but start with something that's simple to where if it doesn't work out, it don't kill you. We all have those jobs that are like that. Well, we're, like I said, the worst case scenario, I'll send the parts back to the mill. We'll recycle it. That kind of thing.
Right.
You got to be willing to try something. If you don't, you're just. I don't know how you make it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of machine shops of all different sizes in the state. I mean, there's a lot of machining, different types and different, like you said, different industry segments they serve and different sizes, but it's a competitive space. I mean, that's
Yeah.
and you have to be willing to change or give a little bit, right? Because it's constantly changing with or without you, right? So I think that's sometimes things that we run into with some of the smaller, under 20 employee manufacturers. Sometimes that seems to be an ongoing challenge to some degree. It's just being able to take that next step beyond. And like you said, even if it's just experimenting with it and knowing your limitations and sort of de-risking it up front, I think that's probably a good practice just to see if you can do it. That's the easiest way to get some additional capacity and serve your customers without taking on that labor cost, which is usually the barrier for a lot of the smaller folks for sure, is just taking that on, especially if it's a family business.
Mhm.
I guess let's change gears a little bit because this is something I know that is really, something you're passionate about. And I know a lot of manufacturers we talk to, it always comes up. I mean, workforce is the topic of the day. But I'm interested, Hartsville is it's a small town. And I'm curious, how are you sort of tackling that whole concept of, recruiting new employees and getting them engaged in, working in manufacturing, working at Hogge Precision? I mean, kind of how are you approaching that, recruitment and retention effort in your area?
Sure. So, you know, that's not a new problem. That's a problem that has always existed. Again, I use what my experience from my dad. I mean, even back in the 70s, finding good help was really difficult. Our business is unique in that in the precision machining world, the kind of tolerances we deal with, it's, not just any machinist can do what we do. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a guy that came to work with us, and he's still with us, a fantastic fellow. And we had hired him, and then a few weeks later, a friend of his came to interview as well, and I overheard him tell his buddy during the tour, they drill holes here better than we bore them. That was just so I guess the skill level and the level of precision that we do here is different. But as far as attracting and retaining talent, that's always a struggle. It is a struggle here. We're a smaller company, and we compete against Fortune 500 companies for labor all the time. And we're never going to be able to match them in everything that they do, but we work with them. And by that I mean, we're trying to partner together, work with our education system, work with our technical college system, and even our local 4-year college to build this pipeline of employees that we need for the 21st century. Um, I've served on advisory committees to our local technical college for 15 plus years. It's sad that we don't have any more participation than we do, at least for our field. It's better than it was in the past, but it could be better because when I go to those meetings, there are other companies that I know of that are not represented there, and that's discouraging. We also have the local career center for the public high school. Very involved with that, working with them as well in an advisory capacity. They need some cutting tools, or they need some, a few bar ends of material to make projects for students. We do those kind of things. So it starts there, partnering with those institutions, working closely with them, offering jobs while the students are in school, whether it be high school or the collegiate level. That's how we've built our workforce, especially for the last 15 years. I would say 80% of our staff went through that program. If they're in the Darlington or Florence County area, they would have gone through a DCIT, which is the high school, or a Florence Darlington Technical College program for a machine tool. That's usually what we're looking for. It takes time. You've always got maybe one or two you don't necessarily need from I guess a budgetary standpoint. But if you're not investing in those people, you're you're going to be in the situation you're in now. And not all of them stay. You wish all of them could stay, but I think you had a one of your previous shows, you talked about the lifers. The lifers don't exist anymore.
No.
It's 3 to 7 years, and that's it. And that's hard to accept. Sometimes that's hard not to take personally, but I get it. It's just the way the world works. So our job is to be as engaging as we can, to provide as much rewarding, meaningful work as we can, and career advancement as we possibly can, and hopefully get some good work out of folks. But that's how we're doing it. Again, the automation helps us a lot. We've talked about lights out. About 5 years ago, we brought in our first robot for doing machine tending, and now we've got a couple, and we're looking to add some more, because I don't want these skilled machinists loading parts all day. That's boring. Nobody wants to do that. When I was on the floor, I hated it for the most part. Um, the longer the cycle time, the better, because then you could walk away and go do something else. But just for, my brain's running a million miles an hour all the time. And that was just the worst thing in the world, was to stand there and load a part day in and day out. But that's what you do. That's part of the work. But the cobots are great for that kind of stuff. It's more engaging for the machinist, because not only do they know the machining side, but then they get to work with the cobots. They're setting those up, they're programming them. And really, their job is making sure it's making quality parts, getting jobs tooled up ahead of time, and then helping out, if we need another machine to set up. So it helps them. A new program that we're working with. So I sit on our local economic development board for the county, and I'm on an education committee, and a team of businesses in the area. We've partnered with our public school system, and we're bringing eighth graders through for tours. So we have 15 eighth graders come through once a month. In fact, we've got our last tour of the semester next week, and we just show them what manufacturing is. We talk to them about, here's the things you need to learn. Here's why you learn the English. Here's why you learn the math. Here's why you need to be able to do geometry. I remember as a kid in school, and most people do, I'm never going to need this. When am I ever going to need to know how to solve a right triangle? Well, guess what? You want to be in machining every day. I mean, you're dealing with right triangles and parallel lines and all this stuff all day, every day long. So that's how you're going to need it. But we bring the kids through, and we have some hands-on stuff for them that they get to make a little. Our product is a keychain, so we let them make a little keychain, and they get we make a bunch of them ahead of time, because it takes about 6 or 7 minutes to do one, but they get to load one, and they get to see it being made, and our team answers all kind of questions they might have about the process, and we take them into the quality lab and show them how it's measured. We go back to the tool crib in our laser etching area, and our etching machine, we've got enclosures built around it so you can watch it while it etches. But we let them personalize it. They put their name on it, their jersey number for the sports, social media names, which it can be quite comical. Uh, but when they leave here, they've been exposed to a little bit of everything. They've had some hands-on. They see that it's relatively it's clean, it's fun, it's cool. There's a lot of technology involved in what we're doing, and most of the kids, some of the surveys that the school system's done for us, it changed their mind about manufacturing, or it said, hey, maybe I want to consider it as a potential career path, or we didn't even know you guys existed. Now, we've been here almost 35 years. So just, those kind of things. It really is. If we wait for the education system, and I'm not knocking them at all, because God bless them, they've got enough that they have to deal with. But if we as manufacturers just wait on them to solve the problem, it's never going to get fixed. You've got to be engaged. You've got to work with them. You got to put in the work, and that's what I found. That's what we're doing. It's worked. It's about the best thing I know to do. In all honesty, is to just partner with these different groups. Because if we're just trading employees, it's not helping anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's great that you're bringing, I mean, the middle schoolers, that's the right time. A lot of people are trying to get in front of kind of their career planning anyway. But like you said, I've said it many times before, and it's just one of those things that I feel very strongly about is nobody knows what goes on inside your four walls. There's no
Yeah.
way they can even imagine if they've never worked in that industry before. So, to your point, you're kind of overcoming the myths of manufacturing. Oh, it's, dark and dirty, dangerous type of work, and then they come in and they see a clean facility and technology, and you're able to create things. I mean, it's really kind of breaking down some of those barriers. But if you don't do it right, if you don't share your story, if you don't let people in your doors and demonstrate what you really are doing, it kind of leaves things open to a inaccurate narrative about manufacturing opportunities, right? And that's always, I think, just that's a really unfortunate thing if folks are not opening their doors, because I think there's so many missed opportunities. So I think it's awesome you're bringing in eighth graders, and that's when they start kind of formulating those decisions about what they might want to do, before they ever get into high school. So it's the right time for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it right now, it can be a tough sell, because for 40 years we've all been told, you graduate high school, you go to Clemson University. That's what I did, and I'm a Clemson guy, as you know. But like, that was your only choice. You're going to go to school, you're going to graduate, you're going to go to college. And that, we've told young people that is the path to success. And as we have learned really over the last 10 to 15 years, those things are still incredibly important. Don't get me wrong. And I tell these kids that if you need specialized training, you want to be a teacher, you want to be a doctor, you want to be an attorney, you want to be an engineer, you absolutely go to those 4-year colleges. But if you're not sure, learn a skill, learn a trade, whether it's machine tool, whether it's welding, whether it's maintenance, whether it's HVAC, whether it's plumbing. I hate to say it, but the machine tool side, as I have learned, it can be outsourced. But I've never outsourced a plumber or an air conditioner, because when those two things break, you don't need somebody here in 6 weeks. You need somebody here right now, and it can be a wonderful career. So there's so many options out there. I'll tell the kids, if you don't know, don't go rack up 40 or $50,000 in student debt. Go learn a trade that might be related to what you think you want to do. I mean, right now you can practically go to school for free. I mean, for our employees that are in school, if they have any education costs that aren't, they're not getting paid for, whether it be lottery, tuition assistance, Pell Grant, whatever the case may be, as long as they hit certain criteria, we pay for the rest. So, I mean, I don't know how you get a better deal than that. And then you say, okay, well, I've got this trade, I've got this skill, I've got a couple of years of experience. Now, okay, I want to go get more training and get that 4-year degree, and hopefully that your employer can pay for it. In my opinion, that's probably the smartest way to do it when you're unsure of, what do I want to do? You know,
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
No, absolutely. Like you said, I mean, go after something, see, get a skill. And then we tell a lot of folks, you can always go back and go to school, but have a much clearer picture of what it is you want to do with your life. And then that's time, time and money well invested, right? So
Yep.
sometimes we don't have it figured out whenever we graduate high school. I don't think a lot of people do, but like you said, once you have a skill, my dad always has a statement of like, nobody can take that away from you. Once you know
Yeah.
how to do something, nobody can take that away from you. So you now have something in your toolbox to carry with you wherever you go. But then obviously maybe you start formulating a plan of, oh, I think I know what I want to go to school for. And like you said, maybe if you stay with an organization, they help you to fund it or at least have some kind of offset for it. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and it helps people to kind of figure out what they want to do with their lives. Not everybody wants to go to college. That's okay. Not everybody needs to. So
Yeah.
I think that's an ongoing conversation that happens a lot is just kind of helping people navigate that. But I think the more that industry takes active part in, sort of setting the stage for what's possible, like you said, that's a missing piece of the conversation sometimes is what can industry do? What's available to people who don't want to necessarily start with college? That's sometimes missing in the conversation. And so there's a lot of assumptions made. And sometimes we miss out on some really great opportunities to hire some folks because they don't think they can work in manufacturing or they don't think they would like it. I think that'll be a battle for us for quite some time, I think, to kind of overcome as many years that we've been going down one path. And now we gotta, like you said, we gotta overcome what we've been saying for years. But I'm glad that people like you and folks in manufacturing that understand it are taking an active role in their communities, because I do think that's going to make the difference in those areas for sure. Um, well, Danny, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I just want to thank you so much for being here. It's been great to catch up with you because I haven't seen you in a while. So it's so nice to finally catch up with you. And I think you've really shared a lot that other people can learn from. And really that's what this is all about. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity and have enjoyed it. When you're in our area again, feel free to stop by.
I'll take you up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the 6 M's of Manufacturing podcast. Special thanks to Danny Hogge Jr. for sharing the story of his family business and the lessons he's learned along the way. Visit the episode notes for details and reference links to information shared during today's discussion. Did you enjoy this episode? That's awesome! Be sure to follow our podcast and share with your network. And remember, don't just make it better.